Good morning. Over the last few months, we have seen an alarming increase in prices. Inflation is at the highest it's been in 2 decades. Grocery bills have gone up 5%. Back-to-school shopping is costing more, and each trip to the gas station seems to hurt just a little bit more. Depuis quelques mois, les prix augmentent de façon alarmante. L'inflation est à son plus haut niveau en 20 ans. Les facteurs d'épicerie ont augmenté de 5%. Le matériel scolaire coûte plus cher et chaque plein d'essence fait encore plus mal au portefeuille. The cost of everything is going up. Inflation is no accident. This is the Canada of the Liberals, NDP, and the Greens. This is where their high debt and reckless economic agenda has led. It's driving up the cost of gas, kids' clothes, groceries, and basic necessities. Canadians and Canadian families deserve better. We need to get inflation under control. We need to lower prices. We need more competition, not less. Les Canadiens et les familles méritent mieux. On doit contrôler l'inflation. On doit réduire les prix. Il faut plus de concurrence, pas moins. Mistakes made by the federal government shouldn't result in household budgets being rewritten. Monthly savings should not be the sacrifice to continue to afford the bare necessities. This is why Conservatives have a detailed plan to make life more affordable. Canada's recovery plan will start by lowering food prices. We will do this by not letting the big players off the hook. We will increase the maximum penalty for price fixing from $24 million to $100 million. We will also introduce criminal penalties, including jail time, for executives who engage in price fixing. On va augmenter la pénalité maximale pour la fixation des prix de 24 millions de dollars à 500 millions de dollars. On va aussi créer des pénalités criminelles, notamment la prison, pour les dirigeants qui fixent eux-mêmes les prix. And we will bring in a tough code of conduct to protect suppliers and to promote grocery competition. Conservatives believe that a competitive marketplace is a healthy marketplace. Competition drives prices down and gives consumers options at a price they can afford. We will bring in legislation on open banking and enable Canadians to connect with financial technology or fintech companies that can provide a better offer for services like mortgages, lines of credit, credit cards, and money transfers. It's time Canadians owned their financial data, not the big banks. We will also order the Competition Bureau to review and investigate bank fees to ensure Canadians are getting value for money. And we will require more transparency for investment management fees so that seniors and savers don't get ripped off. Finally, we will give our competition laws real teeth to prevent a few big companies from dominating whole industries and pushing up prices. A Conservative government will stand up to corporate Canada and reject any mergers that substantially reduce competition that will lead to higher prices. Canadian families deserve better. Canada's recovery plan will leave more money in people's pockets so that they can invest in a better future for themselves and their family. If you and your family aren't concerned about rising prices, well, you have 4 parties to choose from in this election. But if you are, there's only one choice: Canada's Conservatives. Le plan de rétablissement du Canada va laisser plus d'argent dans vos poches. Les Canadiens vont pouvoir économiser pour leurs enfants, pour réaliser leurs rêves ou pour leur retraite. Si vous n'êtes pas inquiet par l'augmentation des prix, vous avez le choix entre 5 partis. Dans le cas contraire, il n'y a qu'un seul choix: les conservateurs du Canada. Together, we can secure a more affordable future. Ensemble, on va agir pour l'avenir. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
We will be taking questions. Nous allons maintenant prendre des questions. Première question, first question.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Mike Lecouture from Global National. I wanted to ask you, your candidate, Kyle Seaback, tweeted that some of his supporters were at that Trudeau event last night, which had to be canceled due to security concerns. I wanted to ask you, what were those campaign volunteers doing there, and what is your message to those people and any other Conservative supporters who'd be showing up at an opponent's event?
My message is simple. We're running on Canada's recovery plan. We're running on a positive campaign for the future of this country. And we need to have a positive campaign on ideas. I strongly condemn any form of harassment and protest like we've seen. We're a democracy. We should be having a healthy and respectful debate of ideas. And we have no time for people that bring a negativity to campaigning. On doit avoir une campagne sur les idées pour notre avenir. Et moi, on a une campagne positive avec un plan pour l'avenir, avec notre plan pour le rétablissement du Canada. Je n'ai pas le temps pour les manifestations, l'harcèlement dans une campagne politique. Nous sommes une démocratie et on doit avoir un débat positif entre les partis.
Just as a follow-up, how concerned are you about the discourse that we're having in politics right now in Canada? And are you, when you consider that the RCMP was forced to shut down an event due to security concerns, are you at all worried that we are sliding into a type of divisive politics that we once, as Canadians, looked down upon in the US just a few months ago?
I want us to have a positive debate about the future of our country. We've been through a difficult year and a half with this pandemic. That's why on day 2 of this campaign, we launched Canada's Recovery Plan, and we're running on a positive vision for the future to get people back to work, to tackle the cost of living crisis. As I said today, we're going to try and bring costs and bills down for Canadians, give them a break at the time they need it. This cannot be a time where we are divided. And I urge everyone to put the country and our democracy first. Let's have a positive debate of ideas on the future. That's my approach, and that's my expectation for every single member of our team, from the leader to the first time someone's volunteering. We have a positive vision for the country.
Est-ce que je peux vous demander de répéter en français, M. O'Toole?
J'ai des attentes pour une campagne positive, pour moi comme chef et pour tous nos bénévoles. Et c'est pourquoi immédiatement, on a lancé notre plan pour le rétablissement du Canada. On a des idées positives pour notre avenir. Après la pandémie, c'était difficile, mais on doit avoir une relance économique à travers le pays avec des idées pour notre avenir. Ce n'est pas le temps pour division, pour les manifestations ou l'harcèlement. On doit travailler ensemble comme Canadiens.
Prochaine question.
Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Monsieur O'Toole, vous dites « Je ne veux pas imposer la vaccination obligatoire aux fonctionnaires ni à mes candidats ». Vous ne voulez pas dire non plus si personnellement vous êtes pour ou contre le passeport vaccinal dans les provinces. Est-ce que vos positions donnent du carburant aux manifestants anti-vaccins qu'on a vus justement hier devant la campagne libérale?
Ce n'est pas le cas, non, parce que j'encourage tous les Canadiens et Québécois de se faire vacciner. Les vaccins sont très importants. Les vaccins sont efficaces et sécuritaires, et c'est pourquoi ma femme et moi, Rebecca et moi, on a enregistré nos vaccinations parce que c'est un outil très important. Comme vous le savez, je vais respecter les décisions personnelles pour la santé, mais on doit travailler ensemble pour lutter contre la 4e vague de la pandémie. On doit utiliser tous les outils, incluant les tests de dépistage rapides. We must work together to fight COVID-19, and that's why I encourage vaccines. I encourage people to find out how safe and effective they are. It's why my wife and I, who suffered from COVID, publicized the vaccination process we had so that people can learn more and get vaccinated to help us fight COVID. We will always respect people making their personal health decision. And we also have to use daily rapid tests and all tools we have because we all have a role to fight COVID-19. I don't think we should be in this election at a time we're still fighting this pandemic, but we all have a role to play. We all have to work together to fight COVID.
Mais, Monsieur O'Toole, je comprends que vous encouragez les Canadiens à se faire vacciner, mais en même temps, vous ne dites pas « je veux que la vaccination soit obligatoire, par exemple, pour les fonctionnaires ». Vous ne dites pas aux provinces « le passeport vaccinal, ça doit être appliqué partout ». Donc, est-ce que vous ne pensez pas que si la classe dirigeante parlait d'une seule voix sur cette question, est-ce que ça ne viendrait pas couper l'herbe sous le pied des manifestants qu'on a vus hier?
Je n'ai pas le temps pour les manifestations ou l'harcèlement sur la situation avec la crise sanitaire. C'est totalement inacceptable. Et c'est pourquoi j'encourage les vaccins et je vais travailler en étroite collaboration avec les provinces. Et quelques provinces sont en train de créer un passeport vaccinal ou des règles sanitaires et je vais respecter. C'est le temps pour le gouvernement fédéral d'avoir une approche de partenariat avec les provinces. Particulièrement en pleine d'une pandémie, on doit travailler ensemble et c'est pourquoi on a une campagne positive avec un plan positif pour notre avenir.
Just in English on the health demonstrators.
This is a time we have to all be working together as Canadians, all playing our role to keep the spread of the fourth wave of the pandemic down. That's why I encourage vaccines as the most effective and safe tool. That's why we all have to play our role. The provinces, many of them are rolling out health measures, including in some cases vaccine passports. I will always respect what the provinces do to try and keep their people safe and keep their economies going. This is a time not for division, not for protests and harassing political debate. This is a time to embrace our democracy and tackle this crisis together. That's the positive campaign we'll be bringing.
Next question.
Andrew Lawton, True North. Days before the House of Commons rose for the summer, the Liberals introduced Bill C-36, which would restore Section 13 to the Canadian Human Rights Act. Now, you've said in your platform that you oppose that method of regulating online hate. I'm curious if you do believe online hate is a problem in need of a government solution and how you would address it if not using the Canadian Human Rights Act.
Well, there's two ways. First, as a public official, I've tried to use the voice I have to fight against hate, intolerance, racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. We've seen an alarming rise in the pandemic of hate, whether acts in person or online. And we have to come together as a country. That's why I've used the podium, literally I have, to try and always promote that, respect, understanding, tolerance, the rule of law. These are the pillars of our democracy. The second thing that we can do is use our criminal code. You cannot promote violence and hatred towards an identifiable group. And we should work with law enforcement where people are committing acts of hate to stop that. And I think that's what people want to see happen is this hate that's fueling directed violence against other citizens is completely unacceptable. And I think all levels of government and law enforcement need to work together. On doit travailler ensemble contre la haine. Et particulièrement, on a vu des augmentations des actes haineux pendant la pandémie. Et c'est important pour moi, comme un politicien, d'utiliser ma position de lutter contre l'intolérance, l'islamophobie, l'antisémitisme, le racisme. On doit travailler sur ça. On a des lois aussi contre la haine et on doit travailler avec les autres paliers de gouvernement et avec les policiers d'utiliser nos lois.
Your platform pledges to, quote, promote free speech on campus. You say that you're going to work with provinces and territories to ensure that post-secondary institutions accommodate a range of perspectives. Yes or no, are you talking about withholding federal funding to universities and colleges that don't, in an O'Toole government's view, uphold free speech?
Free speech is a fundamental pillar of our democracy, and that's why we have to make sure we can have a debate of ideas, an informed and positive debate about the future of our country. It's why I condemned yesterday to see harassment and intimidation of anyone, any political party putting forward their ideas in our democracy. That is a fundamental pillar, and I think Canadians want to see a healthy and respectful debate. I think the same extends to campus settings. I learned myself that when you're challenged, when I went to law school, you think about the other side, you think about the other perspectives, and sometimes it will reinforce your perspective, sometimes it will give you balance. And we encourage a lot of the universities to look at what the University of Chicago has done to keep that campus setting an open place for respectful debate to grow the education environment for students and to grow our democracy.
Withholding funding, yes or no?
Next question, please.
On doit avoir un débat respectueux dans cette élection, mais sur les campus aussi. Et c'est pourquoi on va encourager les institutions de suivre une approche de l'Université de Chicago sur la liberté d'expression. C'est primordial pour notre société, pour notre démocratie. Et on doit avoir un débat respectueux pendant la campagne et sur les campus.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. This is Kate Bolingaro from Bloomberg. You talk about giving competition laws real teeth, and I'm interested in talking about the big tech sector. We've seen a lot of consolidation there over the last few years. And I'm wondering, as Prime Minister, will you direct the Competition Authority to tighten merger regulations and increase abusive dominance investigations in the tech sector?
We'd like those provisions in terms of abusive dominance to be applied across the board. When there is dominance by only a few players, you see prices go up. And with the cost of living crisis in Canada right now, we cannot afford that. We already have Mr. Trudeau's inflation and higher taxes. We have to make sure that there's healthy competition for both options for consumers to choose and downward pressure on price. We have been calling for this for months when we condemn some of the supplier increases in the grocery sector, for example. We want to see prices come down for cell phones, for fees, and securing that competition is critical, and this is something I worked on in the private sector on competition. It can be used to make sure it helps consumers and provides choice.
So following up on that, you just mentioned the telecom sector. If you're elected, will you loosen rules that have kept the market to 4 players and have arguably kept prices high, including making it easier for other companies, including from abroad, to enter the market?
Yes, that's in Canada's recovery plan. We would welcome competition. I think some of our big providers are very, very capable companies that can take on competition from abroad. The one caveat I put on this is if we're opening up our market to more competition, say from our friends to the south, we expect that same measure of ability for our companies to compete. So you're going to see, not just in telecommunications, but in critical commodities. We need to work closely with countries like the United States to make sure we have access to competition if we're granting access in return. Under Mr. Trudeau, our trade relations with the United States are in shambles. We've seen that with Keystone XL, Line 5 at risk, more Buy American, raising softwood lumber tariffs. Mr. Trudeau has no ability to exert our interests. I will.
Next question.
Good morning, Kevin Gallagher, CTV National News. I'd like to ask you about your platform promise to do away with the government stream of refugees coming to Canada. You'd have it exclusively private. How will this affect numbers of refugees that would come to Canada in the future?
Well, that's not exactly correct, Kevin. We still will have the public route for times of crisis, when the government needs to move very, very quickly, like the case in Afghanistan or Syria. We need that capacity when we need to help people who are at risk. As you know, I'm very frustrated that Mr. Trudeau squandered months and didn't have the ability to get people out of risk quickly enough. We need that public capacity. But longer term, we also have to work with community groups that help sponsor refugee families, and they have much better outcomes of employment, on language, on engagement, because they have community groups helping them connect in their new communities. So when we have non-urgent situations, we have to work more with community groups who help resettlement on the ground. But in times of crisis, we need action. And Mr. Trudeau has been absent throughout this Afghanistan crisis, and people are paying the price for that. Malheureusement, le gouvernement de M. Trudeau était lent sur la situation en Afghanistan. C'est inacceptable et on doit aider les Afghans en danger à cause de leur aide pour notre pays. Avec notre programme pour les réfugiés, on doit aider les réfugiés en crise immédiatement avec une approche publique, mais aussi avoir une approche de travail en étroite collaboration avec les organisations communautaires sur le terrain, d'aider les familles réfugiées avec leur transition ici au Canada. Et ça serait notre approche, une approche d'urgence et une approche avec les groupes communautaires pour les réfugiés.
So it seems that you would honor the government agreement to have 20,000 Afghan refugees come here, but I also want to know how that system would work in the future for the government employees that do facilitate the government system of refugees that come to Canada, the government stream. If you're going to turn it off and on during a crisis, how are you going to have the human resources there to make that happen in a quick time frame, like you're saying?
Well, Canada always accepts refugees each year, people that are persecuted, people that are fleeing violence, that are persecuted for their religious or cultural minority. We've had the Rainbow Road helping LGBTQ community escape horrific circumstances abroad. As we have those situations all the time, we need to work with community groups to help people get settled in their new community. They have better success in Canada when we empower community organizations to help. When there is a crisis and we have to move swiftly, like in Afghanistan, that's where the government approach, the public route needs to be used. We've been calling for months. In fact, when I was in Fredericton over a month ago, many veteran and military families were desperately pleading with the government and Mr. Trudeau for months to help translators, other support people in Afghanistan who were at risk. And Mr. Trudeau did nothing. And like many things, he waits until there's a crisis boiling over until he acts. We need leadership, we need a plan, and that's what Canada's Conservatives will provide.
En français?
On doit avoir une approche sérieuse sur la scène internationale. Malheureusement, M. Trudeau était lent. Quand j'étais ici à Fredericton, il y a un mois, j'ai écrit une lettre sur la situation en Afghanistan parce que c'était troublant pour les familles militaires ici à Gagetown. Et les familles militaires, nos vétérans, méritent un gouvernement qui va agir sur la situation en Afghanistan. Et ça serait mon approche. Action, un plan et aider les Afghans en risque à cause de leur travail avec nos soldats, avec nos organisations à but non lucratif. C'est le temps pour un gouvernement qui va agir dans nos intérêts.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. Stephanie Taylor with the Canadian Press. When you were in a government that cut foreign aid or didn't put foreign aid to funding abortion services overseas, if you formed government, would that also be your position?
We want to make sure that all aid gets out to help people, and we will partner with aid organizations to deliver the support they need, whether it's child maternal health, any form of assistance. We would like to see that aid directly deployed quickly. If you look at the situation in Afghanistan, for example, part of the reason I've proposed security corridors is so that we can get aid on the ground quickly and safely and get people out. And what services the NGOs on the ground want to provide, that will be something that we support their efforts.
You have repeatedly said this campaign that you are pro-choice and that a government wouldn't reopen the abortion debate, but something advocates on the ground say needs to happen is better access to abortion services. So would you use the Canada Health Act to enforce provinces to fund abortion services like the issue here is in New Brunswick with Clinic 554?
I am pro-choice, and I'm happy to say that whenever I'm asked. I will make sure that all Canadians have access to the services, the health services they have a right to, including the women to have a right to make the choice for themselves and have access for those services. When I was here in New Brunswick over a month ago, I spoke to Premier Higgs about ensuring that that access is there, and he assured me it is and will be. This is how I will approach myself. Always try and have positive relations with all the provinces, but I will always stand up for the rights of all Canadians, including women, to access health services that are their right.
Next question, please.
Je vais toujours travailler en partenariat avec les provinces, avec une approche de respect. Je suis pro-choix et je vais toujours défendre les droits des femmes de choisir pour elles-mêmes. C'est très important et l'accès est important à travers le pays, incluant ici à Fredericton. Et c'est pourquoi j'ai eu un appel avec le Premier ministre Higgs quand j'étais ici en juillet. Et ça serait mon approche, un fédéralisme de partenariat, mais je vais toujours respecter les droits des femmes et les droits de la communauté LGBTQ aussi. C'est important pour moi.
Next question.
Janice McGregor from CBC News. Later this afternoon, we're moving on to Prince Edward Island. Earlier this summer, on the subject of prices and affordability, the government of PEI reached an agreement with the federal government on drug prices, kicking off what could eventually be a national Pharmacare plan. Would a future Conservative government commit to maintaining the agreement reached with Prince Edward Island on drug prices?
Well, I look forward to getting back to Prince Edward Island and hope to be having a call or some time with Premier King. I've always enjoyed my interactions with him, and that will be my approach. And what I've provided to all premiers is a roadmap to secure our healthcare system. On the second day of this campaign, we launched Canada's Recovery Plan, which will have the biggest investment in a generation in our public universal healthcare system. 6% increasing minimum each year to allow us to partner, to make sure that there is access to cutting edge drugs like biologics and others, to make sure that we're keeping prices down for Canadians, and to make sure there is more choice. Because with biologics and other innovative medicines, we need to make sure that Canadians have access to that. So this historic investment we're making to secure our healthcare system is exactly what the premiers want. Predictable, stable, increasing funding, and a federal partner that will be there for our healthcare system.
So I'm going to report that as a no unless you correct me. I also have to ask, you were talking about positive campaigning, how you and your team want to run a positive campaign. What positive reason is there for people in Conservative t-shirts, volunteers, people affiliated with Kyle Seaback's campaign to turn up at Justin Trudeau's event late yesterday? What positive or benevolent thing were they doing there?
There is no positive reason, and if they were, they will no longer be involved with our campaign. Full stop. I'm running a positive campaign about the future of our country. I'm worried about the future of our country, the debt, the challenges we face. That's why we're putting out a positive plan. And from myself right through to any volunteer, I expect professionalism, I expect respect. I respect my opponents. I often say that Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Singh and the other parties don't have a plan, but I respect them. I want to hear their ideas, and we'll be having debates on our ideas. And I expect, without question, all of our volunteers across the country to talk about our positive vision for the future. That vision includes record investments in health, record investments in pharmaceutical options, including biologics, and I know when I speak to Premier King about that, we will make sure that's an important element, because Mr. Trudeau failed in the NAFTA negotiations to provide faster access to biologics. So that will be our approach. I want to run on a positive vision for Canada's future, and we need to have a respectful debate of the ideas to get there. J'ai des attentes pour une campagne positive pour notre parti. C'est pourquoi j'ai lancé notre plan pour le rétablissement du Canada immédiatement. C'est pourquoi je vais avoir un comportement professionnel et respectueux chaque jour. Et ça serait l'approche de tous nos bénévoles. C'est point final. On doit avoir une campagne positive sur nos idées pour notre avenir. On a des défis après 15 mois de la pandémie. On a des défis avec le niveau de chômage, avec le déficit, mais on doit avoir un débat respectueux sur notre vision pour l'avenir. Ça serait mon approche comme chef et j'ai des attentes pour tous nos bénévoles d'avoir la même approche.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. In 2018, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ordered the government compensate Indigenous kids in care who were unnecessarily put into care and removed from their communities. The federal government has been fighting that order in federal court ever since. Would you continue that legal battle against those orders, or would you agree to meet those orders if you were Prime Minister?
As Prime Minister, I will always try and bring people together and always try and come forward with positive resolution. I admire the work done by Ms. Blackstock. I've told her that in person when I met her. And when it comes particularly to situations with Indigenous peoples, much like it was when I was Veterans Minister, I tried to resolve disputes because I didn't want challenges or problems being addressed through the courts when we can bring people together and try and come up with solutions together.
That doesn't answer my question. From your answer, it seems as if you would continue the federal government's appeals of those orders. Equity in child welfare for Indigenous groups is the #1 TRC call to action because of the legacy or the direct line that can be drawn from residential schools to the disproportionate number of Indigenous kids in care now. So respectfully, can you please say yes or no? Will you continue the government's fight against those orders, or will you drop the legal battle and meet the orders?
I don't want to see the federal government fighting Indigenous communities in court. In fact, when it comes to child welfare, when I met with Chief DeLorme at the Cowessess Nation, we talked about his leadership bringing forward the first child welfare regime at a First Nation level that we need to see more of across the country. And as I said, we will try and bring people together because reconciliation is very important to our party. It's important to me. The first question I asked as Leader of the Opposition was on a call to action. As I've said, I know Mr. Trudeau cares, but when he promised to move on all 94 calls to action and has not really fulfilled much action, that erodes trust between the federal government and Indigenous peoples. I will try and build trust, build partnerships. J'ai beaucoup de respect pour Mme Blackstock et les dirigeants autochtones à travers le pays. On doit travailler ensemble, pas dans les tribunaux, mais avec une approche de partenariat. C'est pourquoi c'était ma première question dans la Chambre des communes, c'était sur la réconciliation. C'est pourquoi je suis en train de connecter et de discuter les enjeux avec les Premières Nations et les dirigeants à travers le pays. C'est pourquoi j'ai eu une conversation avec Chief DeLorme à Cowessess sur leur approche pour les enfants. On doit travailler ensemble sur la réconciliation.
This will be the last question. Ce sera la dernière question.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Tom Bateman from the Telegraph Journal. I want to start by asking about your plans to support campaigns in other ridings in New Brunswick, particularly St. John Rothsay, Miramichi, Grand Lake, that many people expect to be close. Will voters in those ridings see you before the end of the campaign?
Well, they've already seen me. I was there a month ago, as Andrea knows. We had a great tour in New Brunswick, and we've got Andrea Johnson here in Fredericton, who's a great candidate, a big fighter for our military families and veterans here, and I've got lots of friends myself. I was in the Miramichi with Jake Stewart, who obviously brings a a great background in the federal and the provincial government and in the region who will be great. And Mel Norton, as a former mayor of St. John, we had a great time there where we got to see the investments in the port actualized, investments that were first made when I was in the Conservative cabinet at the end of our time in government. It's great to see the economy moving forward in New Brunswick. Our recovery plan will accelerate that, and you will probably see me in those locations, but I'm very, very proud of our candidates.
That's great. And then simply, do you agree that New Brunswickers currently have appropriate access to abortion in this province? Thank you.
As I said, when I was here last time, I had a call with Premier Higgs, and I raised that. We had a very positive conversation. I'm very open with the fact I'm pro-choice, and I'm going to make sure that women can access services, making their decisions about their health care in all parts of the country. That will be my approach as Prime Minister, is defending the rights of Canadians and securing a more prosperous future. And he assured me it is something that the government will not only maintain, but make sure that access is there. Comme j'ai dit, je suis pro-choix et c'est important pour moi d'avoir des conversations avec les premiers ministres sur tous les sujets. Et j'ai eu une conversation avec le Premier ministre Higgs sur l'accès à l'avortement ici et on va travailler ensemble parce que c'est important. Et il m'a dit qu'il y a du accès maintenant et c'est important parce que c'est un droit pour les femmes. Et je vais toujours défendre les droits humains des Canadiens, des Québécois. Ça serait mon approche comme Premier ministre.
It will be all for today. Ce sera tout pour aujourd'hui. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.